Hi, everybody. Good day. This is Gary Van Antwerp from SMM Connect, a sales and marketing management community for networking and peak performance, and especially for webinars, including the Dave Stein Executive Series, which is what we're doing today. I want to welcome you to today's event. Is Sales Management the weak link in the revenue chain? And I want to welcome our speakers as well. We very much appreciate having Dave Stein and Tony Hughes here. And Dave Stein will lead off. Again, this is part of Dave's Executive Series where we have a number of excellent webinars lined up. And Dave, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you right now.
Thanks, Gary. And I'm Dave Stein, CEO and founder of ES Research Group, and I am a regular columnist for Sales and Marketing Management magazine. My firm, ES Research Group, is really the only firm out there that looks at sales training programs and the companies and people that provide them. So we're an independent analysis and research firm, and we produce research reports about sales training programs and sales training companies. And my role here is more of a facilitator and host. I got to invite a few guests over the next couple of months. My first one is Tony Hughes, and I'll introduce him in just one moment. So without further ado, I'm going to take a little longer than I might now, because Tony Hughes, although Gary and I certainly know who he is, the fact that he's Australian and lives and works in Australia mostly, his name isn't very well known in the U.S. It will be a lot more well known over the next number of months. But whereas the typical names that you see all the time on the blogs and the webinars and the presentations you may know about, Tony is not such a familiar entity. So I first heard about Tony from a gentleman by the name of Tom Snyder last year. He sent me Tony's book called The Joshua Principle, Leadership Secrets of Selling. And Tony, he and I went back and forth, and I wound up being asked to write the foreword for the latest printing, which just came out about 2 or 3 months ago. And I'm going to just take a minute and read to you an excerpt from that foreword, because I think it's something that will get you charged up and ready for some of the things that Tony's going to talk about. So this is kind of from the middle section of the foreword. In a nearly empty forward cabin for a 9-hour flight from delivering a keynote speech in Warsaw, Poland, that's Dave Stein, opened Tony's book. I couldn't put it down until I finished it hours later. A compelling story is an understatement. Joshua encapsulates precisely what those of us on the consulting side of selling need to be able to share with our clients in a way no one I've ever met or whose book I've ever read has been able to do. This is a book about the coming of age, coming of competence, and of professionalism for an everyday business-to-business salesperson. And from me having framed it as such, I'll tell you this. Tony Hughes scores a perfect 10 in how this story plays out. 110 for describing how executives really buy, another 10 for accurately portraying precisely how RSVP selling will win their business, and one final 10 for weaving all of this into a warm and entertaining story with a bit of mystery. And then the forward goes on. Tony himself, a bit about his bio, recently launched himself as a management consultant for B2B and enterprise selling, but up until late last year he had a stellar career in sales management, and was country manager roles in leading corporations in the Asia Pacific region. Those roles included being managing director at Sugar CRM, Open Text, and Hummingbird. Tony has 25 years of sales, management, and business leadership experience in Asia Pacific and North America, and he's taught leadership for Sydney University. He serves on a number of boards and is an internationally recognized speaker in the field of sales management and professional selling. So today, Tony's going to talk about sales leadership and poses the question, get ready to go, Tony, is sales management the weak link in the revenue chain? Take it away.
Hey, Dave, thank you for that very kind introduction. So very early in the morning here, although some people think that Australia could be a little backward, I'm actually coming to you from the future. So it's Friday here, obviously Thursday there in North America. This is really the question that I'm posing today, and by the end of this, I not only want to give you the answer, but what I think are not all of, but some of the key mistakes that sales management can make, but more importantly, what we can actually do about it. I'm not sure whether you've all heard of a guy called Lou Schachter, but Lou was a co-speaker with me at a couple of sales leadership conferences, and I have a huge amount of respect for him. He's with BTS Global, but he made the comment a couple of years ago at a seminar we were speaking at that 40% of B2B professional salespeople, field salespeople, won't have jobs in 10 years from now. And that's a pretty confronting view. And he went on to talk about why he thinks that's the case. But in essence, professional selling is changing, not just because of the GFC, which I'll talk about in a moment, but professional selling is changing because professional buyers, I think, are evolving at a faster rate than what we do in the sales industry. And one of the good things about the GFC is it's really forced us to look at the way that we segment and address markets and the way that we sell. And the last 5 years, I think, globally has absolutely been tough. There's probably three big things that all of the analysts will say that they're seeing, and one is the rise of consensus-based decision-making. So there's a lot more people inside organizations that we need to get across the line if we're going to get a complex B2B deal done. And the era of just being able to sell to a single senior relationship and have them drive that through their organization, that happens a lot less of the time now. And the other thing too is that there's a lot of risk aversion and general distrust of ROI claims that are made by the vendor, and a much stronger focus on price and commoditization. Just to bring the whole topic of commoditization into sharp relief, the USA post-World War II was absolutely the global leader in manufacturing and manufacturing quality, and actually obviously taught the Japanese about quality, and other Asian countries such as Korea are getting very good very, very fast. If you look at what's happened to the manufacturing industry, that particular ship you can see, there's 5 of those that have been built now, and they take just 5 days to travel from China to the States. An aircraft carrier is not quite as big as that. Aircraft carrier's got 15,000 crew. This just has 13. And this ship travels fast enough to actually water ski behind. But the amazing thing about this is that these ships predominantly travel to deliver goods to Walmart to be consumed in the States. And these ships get unloaded in hours, not days, but every single one of these ships returns back empty. And the point I'm really trying to make here is that every business tries to build a moat around its castle to protect itself from the competition. And I guess for markets like the USA, tariff protection and the sheer distance from Asia was for a long time that moat that really protected the business. But those things don't last. The reality for organizations is that things that gave you strong competitive differentiation can actually fade over time. And I believe that almost all complex high-value solutions can drift toward commoditization. So let's have a look at what that means in B2B solution selling. The thing obviously that we all know is that if you're in the transactional commodity business, you need to be able to transact high volumes and drive cost out. Marketing clearly obviously plays a much stronger role. And then for high-value solutions, that's typically the realm of expensive field B2B selling. The thing that's really been going on, though, is that a lot of high-value solutions are really more commodity solutions now. And one of the big mistakes that organizations can make is to apply expensive field sales force resources down to where things are becoming transactional commodities. And that basic quadrant, the shape of it, I believe, is fundamentally changing. The transactional commodity piece is becoming much larger, and the high-value solution piece is becoming far smaller. Let's think about this quadrant in the terms of where you apply your resources to potentially bring inside sales under marketing and force field sales to actually move to value. So if you have a look at the traditional roles of people here, the term hunter and farmer, that was really coined by the insurance industry. But the traditional hunter and farmer roles, I believe, are the ones that are in trouble. So when you look at the fact that up to 40% of people are not going to have careers in 10 years from now, the ones that fail to actually move to value are the ones that are going to really be in trouble. And what this slide here is really trying to show, and also a little complex, is that if you're a farmer relationship seller where you really manage accounts, I don't believe that the funding is going to be there in the future to really pay for what is in essence a professional visitor. Customers these days, I think, with especially the web and self-service, don't really need someone that just stands in the way between them and getting the answers they want out of the organization, or stands in the way between them just wanting to actually transact. And the whole concept in that top left quadrant at the moment of your traditional business development manager in the field, the big question to ask here is there such thing as a high margin commodity? And my view is very clearly that there's not. So if the margins aren't there to justify or fund the activity of the person in the field, they're obviously going to be in trouble. So what's happening really is that the executive or the field sales force executives need to be able to move very strongly up to value. They need to be able to deal with complexity within the customer side of the business. Otherwise, they're just not going to have a role. The other thing is that the corporate executive board, in their excellent book, The Challenge of Sale, documented a whole pile of research, but one of the pieces that interested me most was that in their surveys of buying organizations, and there are over 1,200 organizations that they surveyed, for most buying organizations, at the point in time where they reach out to a sales organization, when they engage the seller, they're already 57% of the way through their process. And again, the field salesperson has got to be very good at being able to still influence the agenda if they're turning up to the sale that late. But even more so, to be strategic to me means to engage very early. So that's really what those people are going to need to do. Let me just for a moment talk about how professional selling has actually really evolved. To me, where it's landed today is very much on the challenge of sale, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And I'm also a huge fan of Neil Rackham. So if you have a look back in the 70s, you can see that there's the term FAB there, feature, function, advantage, benefit. I was working for Digital Equipment Corporation. They subsequently got bought by Compaq and then Hewlett-Packard. But the thing is that marketing departments were very good at teaching salespeople. I remember sitting through 180 slide deck presentations from marketing, trying to link every single feature and function of product to some kind of benefit. So that was really what was going on in the 70s, and salespeople were talking brochures. Then there was excellent research done by Neil Rackham, and he really was, for the first time in history, the person that did a proper level of PhD academic grade research about how people sell, what works, what doesn't. And he came up with the excellent methodology of SPIN, so situation, problem, implication, then needs, payoff. He probably would have liked to call it SBIB selling, but I guess that doesn't roll off the tongue. B for benefit, but he did that as needs, payoff. And Rackham is still very active today. He was kind enough to review my book for me, and I've been able to meet him a few times. But Neil obviously joined Huthwaite, and they evolved spin selling into value selling. You've got people like Keith Eads and Miller Heimer with solution selling. And those methodologies have evolved. And about 10 years ago, there was a strong focus on insight selling. What are the insights that we're going to take to a client? And let's build on value selling. Let's work out what the business case is that's actually wrapped around either realizing an opportunity for a client or solving a problem. And in my view, challenger selling is really not a new revolutionary approach. It really is iterative. And as evidence of that, on page 82 of the Challenger Sale book, there's a section in there about Neil Rackham's BOLD framework. So he came up with an acronym of BOLD, which is you've got to find something for the client that's big, that is outperforming through the use of innovation. It'll help them outperform their competitors in the market. Its leading edge was the L, and by definition, if it's leading edge, there's going to be an element of risk. And then the D was it's got to be difficult. And his framework for going and having those conversations, identifying those insights and opportunities to go and take to clients, to me was also part of the foundation on which Challenger is being built. So Neil wrote the foreword, and some of his IP is there. I'm a huge fan of Challenger. I think it's a fairly difficult thing to implement for an organization, but it's certainly where the market is today. And the great thing about it is it's forcing conversations inside organizations about how they define value and how they can go and change the world for their customers. The thing with methodologies is that how do you drive a methodology through an organization? And it really brings us back to the question that was posed today, and that is sales management the weak link in the revenue chain? And I actually firmly believe yes. Now, I don't really blame the sales manager completely for that. I think the pressure on sales managers and the way that a lot of middle management resources being cut out of organizations in the GFC, and this relentless pursuit of the urgent is the strategic, we just need to get the revenue in this quarter, isn't at all a healthy thing. But for a CEO, the frustration they have is that they, in their mind, they can't believe the forecast. But the implied statement really is that they don't really feel that they have confidence in the sales organization in their ability to deliver. But the CEO is a big part of the problem because they don't really want the truth. They just want the numbers for this quarter, and they tend to drive sales management down into that left-hand quadrant that I was being quite critical of. People that drift into that bottom left quadrant in those previous slides really don't have a future in professional selling. We need to go and be strategic. We need to create demand. We need to lift the level of value that we're delivering for clients, and outside of the intrinsic value that's in the products and services that we take to them, but extrinsic value in the way that we really understand how their businesses operate. So the CEO of an organization, is trying to drive his sales manager, and if you look at all of the things on this slide, there's a lot of moving pieces there. They want people to use a good methodology. They want them to adhere to process. They want them to coach people as well as manage. But for many sales managers, they're stuck endlessly either in the CEO's office rediscussing the forecast, or they're in endless meetings. And the truth is, in my mind, is that nothing good happens in the office. All of the good things happen there out in the field in front of clients and with partners. So they're wanting to sell value. They want them to plan well. They want them to implement strategy. Depending on who you believe, anywhere from 1/3 to 70% of CRM systems don't succeed. And yet you've got to have a CRM system if you want to be successful in B2B selling. You have to have a CRM system if you want to put customers at the heart of everything that you're doing. And there's all of these endless distractions. The big thing that sales managers, I think, need to do, and it's the thing that most organizations struggle with most, is this whole concept of strategy. So yet another quadrant. I apologize for all of the quadrants. People in consulting can't help themselves. But if you have a look at this quadrant, obviously the bottom left-hand corner is transactional, and the top right-hand quadrant is strategic. And the top left quadrant is the business development manager, and the bottom right quadrant is the account manager kind of role. But what does it really mean to be strategic? The thing for me is when I interview salespeople and I help a lot of my clients hire people, is I'll actually ask that question of them, and I've got to tell you, I almost never get a good answer to the question. And for me, if you ask me, what does being strategic really mean? These points here is really the answer. A strategic person makes sure that they do their research and they prepare really, really well. They make sure they engage at senior levels. One of the big problems for salespeople is they don't seem to understand that in selling, you get delegated down to people that you sound like. So if you sound like a feature function person, you're going to get delegated down to people that evaluate those kinds of things. So if you're going to engage early in the senior levels, you need to engage as a business person and as a domain expert. You need to be willing to challenge the status quo. You need to take them some insights, and insights beyond just generic research, which is typically what marketing departments have done in the past to help salespeople, but those need to go a lot deeper and they need to become very customer specific. The other thing is that if you're going to engage early, you need to do it in a way that creates a bias toward your unique strengths. If the tender does need to be issued at some stage, we want that thing to be wired our way, and then make sure we're embedded in a compelling business case. And the reason that's important is that if you have a look at the statistics for B2B selling, it's 80% of the deals in the qualified pipeline that constitutes the forecast. I know for some organizations, they really only forecast what's won, but if you just define forecast as qualified pipeline, 80% of that business fails to close, and 1/3 of that 80% that fails to close is actually lost to non-decision. It's just lost to apathy within the customer organization. And that's why being strategic, to me, it's critical to make sure that you're embedded in a very strong business case, and then make sure that there's a focus on business value and risk management. I think many salespeople fail to use risk as a weapon in the way that they go and sell. So if you have a look at the value for money equation that most organizations will run, either formally with a weighted criteria or informally, they will define value for money as, is what's being proposed fit for purpose? And then they'll multiply that by, is it from a low risk profile supplier? And those two things together, they'll then assess against the total cost of ownership with whatever their mechanism is actually for assessing that. So aligning with the buyer is also very important. And again, back to that corporate executive board piece of research, that buyers are typically 57% of the way through their process before they engage a salesperson. You can see that there's a solid black line at the bottom of that slide where the two groups of text are. And just go above that, you can see that they're a business case phase. It's above that, it's where they're motivated. So they're at the end of their discovery phase. That's often when buying organizations are engaging sellers. And the problem of coming in at that point in time is it's just too late. If you're getting involved with a client at that point in time, you can see to the right there at the bottom that there's a strong focus on price. They want you to comply with their process. It's hard for you to really exercise influence. They often try and deny you access to real power inside the organization. They put you under a whole lot of time pressure. And sales reps that are engaging at that level typically get blocked with this bottom-up approach. They just get delegated to people who are actually evaluating product. So, with all of this information so far, I guess it begs the question, what should you really do about this? And I've got a couple of ideas. The first is you need to define what strategic or what being strategic means for your people in your organization. It's no good to tell people to go and be strategic if we don't provide them with the tools and the framework to go and do that effectively. So define what being strategic really means for your business. The second thing I would recommend is define value. Define value for your market. It's so unnatural for us to view things from other people's perspectives. The way we're wired is to project what we believe about things. One of the dangers of challenger selling, as much as I'm a big fan, one of the dangers is that implemented poorly, there is a risk that people just take telling is selling or projecting what they think is value to a whole new level. We'll talk about that a little later. So define what value is for your customers and then build an engagement model around those two things. So what does being strategic mean? How do you set an agenda around your unique strengths? How do our customers really define value? And then let's build our engagement strategy, our sales model around those two things. And I'd really encourage you to get hold of the Challenger Sale and read it if you haven't, because it will absolutely provoke thinking in your organization at all levels. So let me get to three of what I think are sins of sales management. And let me get you to the first one. So I think the first big sin of sales management, and these aren't all of them, but these are three that I think are relatively straightforward to address, and I want to provide you with some solutions of what to do with these. So the first thing is hiring and retaining the wrong people. I remember talking to the past CEO of a very large organization. He was a bit of a mentor for me about 10, 15 years ago. And I asked him, what's the biggest mistake that he felt he made in leading a very big organization? And he instantly said to me that the biggest mistake he made was holding on to people that just needed to move on. It's great that we care about people, but if someone's not a good fit, then we need to look ourselves in the mirror and actually do something about that.
Tony, it's Dave. Dave, could I interrupt for a second? Would that be all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we know through research. We just flip back to that previous slide. I'll just give you and everybody else just a piece of real data. We know from our research at ESR that depending on the industry, somewhere between 20 and 33% of salespeople in B2B jobs are are not suited for the positions that they hold, which means no matter how much training, no matter how many CRM packages you give them, no matter how much coaching, no matter what tools and playbooks and e-learning and management time and whatever else, they just don't have the DNA, not the skills, but the DNA in order to be able to succeed in that particular business-to-business role. So what Tony is saying here in terms of number one being hiring and retaining the wrong people, research bears that out. It is a big, big, big problem in the B2B selling world.
Thanks, Dave. That's a great piece of data. And the thing I think that also reinforces is one of the mistakes organizations make is they tend to focus their training efforts and coaching efforts down on that very bottom end of their organization to try and lift them to become average. And I think that is a massive mistake. The right approach is to focus on that middle area of people and help them be great. And again, one of the good things in the Challenger Sale is they identify two personas of salespeople that are quite teachable that you can really lift. But I agree with Dave completely. The second big mistake I think that the sales managers make is they allow people to pursue deals that they really can't win. And salespeople are generally wired to be pretty optimistic that in complex B2B selling, the cost of running a sales organization, of pulling the organization in behind them to try and win the sale, is very expensive. And it's disheartening for organizations to try and pursue business that they can't win. And then the third thing is failing to have closed plans in place. Closed plan is a relatively simple thing to do, but to me it's a discipline that needs to be driven through the sales organization to really try and improve win rates. I'll talk about how we do that in a moment. So let me just go back to the first point. Who belongs in your team? I've actually got a blog. If you don't go there now, obviously, but if you wanted to go to tonyhughes.com.au/rule of 24, one of the things I believe, and this is what I work with CEOs and sales managers as they evaluate their own organizations, is I say, ask yourself these 4 questions about a person that you've got concerns about. And if the answer to 4 of these questions is negative, they just need to move on. So obviously if someone's not performing, it's a big red flag, but they also need to be adhering to the processes and using the tools within the business. Are they really competent? Are they committed? And are they a cultural fit? And if the answer to 2 of any of these is negative, they just need to go. So, these are really difficult decisions to make. And again, in the Challenger Sale, they actually make the point concerning performance is that if you've got a lone wolf style of salesperson that's performing, but these other things down the bottom really aren't there, especially around number 3 and 4, commitment and cultural fit inside the organization, then when they stop performing, they really need to go, because Challenger is an organizational capability, not an individual person. You need to be able to function well as a team. And we all know that we tend to hire based on skills and qualifications, but the reason we fire people is this issue of cultural fit. We need to get good at figuring out cultural fit before we've hired them, not trying to clean up the mess afterward. The next thing is opportunity qualification. To me, there's a lot of good processes for qualifying opportunities, and I've listed them there at the bottom, and I'm sure there's others that you may be aware of. All of these are good. It doesn't really matter what you use, so long as you actually use something well. And there's always 2 big questions, I think, to ask before you dive into the minutiae of the questions in these qualification processes. And the 2 big questions are, well, why are they going to buy anything at all? Are they really committed? Is there a danger that these guys will be part of the 1/3 of business that doesn't close, where they just do nothing? Are they trying to educate themselves, or are they on a fishing expedition? Is the person that's allegedly the executive sponsor for this really outside the power base inside the organization? I've often had salespeople get very confused with the fact that the client might have a budget to do something, but they don't have the actual money locked in. So having a budget doesn't mean that someone's actually committed to spend. So they really need to understand all of those things. So make sure that you're qualifying opportunities well. And there's actually a free tool if you wanted to use on my own website. So at rsvpselling.com, under tools, there's a thing called opportunity qualification, and it's a free web-based qualification tool where you can qualify a deal around, do we have relationships at the right level to win? Have we got a strategy? Can we create unique value that the customer really cares about? And do we really understand their evaluation, selection, and procurement processes properly so that we can forecast accurately? So that's something for free that you can use. And then onto this third thing is have close plans. Now, a closed plan can be as simple as this one that's just built in Excel. It doesn't really matter what the detail there is, but the whole concept of a closed plan is rather than salespeople forecasting a deal based on their need at the end of the month, the quarter, or the fiscal year, rather than them having dates that are all amazingly at the last day of the quarter, let's get dates that the customer has nominated, and let's make the date they're going to buy from us just a date that's about 2/3 the way through all of the other things that matter. So if you get a salesperson to start with, well, where are we today with them, and what are all of the things that they need to go through within their own organization to actually go live and be realizing the benefits of implementing the solution that we're proposing. And I also make a date beyond that, which is what's the date they're going to have a published case study. So let's make sure that part of their process is a benefits realization review for them that they can present back to their executive. But that's going to also, for us, start to frame the key points within a business case. And the whole idea here is that you work with the client on the basis that you want to make sure that you can provide the resources from your organization when they're going to need it, and that you need to understand all of the critical milestones of their project, where all points of risk are, so that you can get resources for them, but it's also going to enable you to forecast accurately. And it's going to be a date that they care about and that they own, and it's going to really identify, are they actually really committed? So just to really wrap up, make sure you build your team around competence, commitment, and cultural fit, and don't just lapse into this whole thing of it's just about performance. I know the CEO says it's just about performance. The tactical thing is the strategic thing. We've just got to deliver the numbers this quarter. But forcing people and organization to do unnatural acts just to keep dragging revenue in ahead of time, I think creates a huge fatigue factor on an organization. And salespeople can easily go and damage a deal when they get pressure put on them, which isn't good for anybody or for long-term business. Strategically pursue deals you know you can win. So get opportunity qualification as part of your standard DNA so that resources aren't being wasted. But what it also does is it identifies where the weaknesses are. And if you do it well, it's going to improve win rates dramatically. And the idea of having closed plans in place is that it not only helps you improve win rates, but it makes sure that you improve forecast accuracy and that you don't get those disappointments. You know, one of the things I find is really common is when organizations don't have closed plans in place that are validated by the client, and there's a couple of key points here. One is that a good closed plan is going to have lots of actions in there by the customer as opposed to being filled with actions just from the seller. And if they do that well, then you know that the client is actually committed to making sure that the date is going to happen. But if you do that, what it avoids is this whole scenario of deals mysteriously slipping at the end of the quarter all of the time. 70% of people's pipelines or forecasts just mysteriously slip over into the next quarter. This will actually help solve that problem because you can see that the dates are actually real. And then there's two other things I'd just like to say in summary that go to the earlier points about commoditization and how do we move the field to value, how do we get people to engage strategically and make those things real and tangible rather than cliches, is just recognize that there really are no silver bullets. There's just unique combinations of things that together put you in a strong position that make you unique. But really think about, what does being strategic really mean? And how do our customers define value? Really important. And then the other thing is consider making structural changes. This concept of a chief revenue officer that maybe has marketing and sales reporting into them so that you can bring sales and marketing together. I think that's one of the critically important things to be able to implement something like the Challenger sale well, but take away from field salespeople as part of that structural change these lower value transactional commodity kind of products and force them to go and sell more complex high value things to their clients around them being a vertical industry domain expert is obviously a very, very important thing to do. And just on the whole subject of strategy versus or strategy and execution, obviously both are important, but the thing I've just seen in the market time and time again is organizations that are kind of like the guys on this golf hole. They stand there looking down the fairway, the water, the trees, and they're thinking, well, what's my strategy? You know, how am I going to play this hole? And they have these great strategies, but the problem is they can't hit the damn ball. And that's the thing in business. A strategy, is only as good as the intelligence of the information that led to it, but a strategy is then only good if you can implement it. You've got to be able to execute the strategy. And really good execution is almost more important than strategy. You know, what we need is simple strategies that are executable and then hardwire into all of our people a very high level of competence in how they actually go and deliver. So that's really it for me. I hope there were some good takeaways there for you, and I might just throw back to Dave to see if there's any questions.
Well, there certainly are for me. I have to tell you, and Tony, now having seen your slides and listening to you talk, as opposed to having read your book, and by the way, Jan also said that he read your book in one sitting, so that seems to be the thing to do. I think once you're into it, you can't put it down. But I think the thing that hit me as you were speaking was just such a clear articulation of the difference between strategy and tactics. And the importance of execution. And it occurred to me in my role as someone who evaluates sales performance improvement companies and sales trainers and sales consultants. I mean, that's what I do for a living. I no longer do sales training. It would be a conflict of interest. But I have to tell you, participants on this call, that many of the people who profess to be experts as expert sales trainers and consultants don't know the difference between strategy and tactics. They literally don't know the difference. And you as consumers of outsourced sales training or third-party sales training, that's just a great question to ask a vendor who's coming in to try to win your business. Explain to me what strategy is and how you're going to apply strategy to helping improve the performance and the effectiveness of my sales team. So that really hit me, Tony. I thought that was really profound. Hey, there's something that in one of your earliest slides, might have been the second or third slide, you used the phrase ROI distrust, and you made a pretty strong point about that. And from my perspective, I think that B2B salespeople don't know. Generally, I'm making a gross generalization here, but don't have enough comfort with numbers, with financials, with the ability to look at their customers' financial statements and make a determination as to where and when and how and with what risk their solution will have an impact on their customer's business from a financial perspective. I think there needs to be a lot more of that. You're saying that there's ROI distrust. Are you agreeing with me? Are you disagreeing with me? Could you just kind of frame that distrust in a way that would kind of explain the need for salespeople to have more or less financial savvy?
Yeah, well, I actually agree with you 100%. So I think salespeople typically wired to go and tell great stories to people. The thing we know is that logic and facts and information makes people think as opposed to act, and it can be paralyzing, whereas stories and emotion will cause a person to make a decision and do something. But that's far less important in larger, complex selling. People need to make evidence-based decisions. And again, that was one of the really good things I liked about Challenger, is that it creates a very strong evidence-based approach. If you're going to go and take a very provocative insight to somebody that's going to necessitate a lot of change management in their organization, you'd better be able to back it up. So I agree with you. Salespeople are not typically wired at all. One of the quite controversial things I believe, people may want to throw rocks at me. I'm glad I'm sitting in Australia right now, but I actually don't think that selling is really a profession. And it's a much longer conversation, but I think it can definitely be done professionally, and there's a lot of moves afoot to make it a profession. But people don't typically have that finance background, and I think being able to sell to the COO, CEO, CFO level and really talk about their business case is very important in large complex selling, and it's definitely a weakness for people.
Well, that just rings so true in your book, and that's one of the things that just made me kind of fall in love with the book. That it not only did explain it, but it told a story around it, so you could really identify with it. Now, I'm somebody who came through that whole value selling kind of era and had gone through financial training and business savvy and that kind of thing. So that always came naturally to me. But let's get back to the Challenger, because you've mentioned a couple of times, the corporate CEB, the Corporate Executive Board, the Challenger sales folks are clear that strategic selling is no longer, or is not, maybe no longer or not about relationship. So where does relationships play into all of this business-to-business selling as you see it today in 2013?
It's interesting you keyed in on that, because that's probably the biggest part of the book that I have a question mark with myself. So I absolutely agree with their focus on how the value of a salesperson is defined. You know, they certainly believe that the era of the professional visitor is dead. People are just too busy to keep having meetings with people in customer land. But I think they're dead wrong about being so dismissive about the role of relationship in complex selling to the enterprise. People buy from those that they trust, and the expertise of the person brings to a deal and their deep domain knowledge, I guess, is the other piece that needs to be there for Challenger to work. So it's putting deep domain experts in front of senior people inside the customer side that's going to give them the confidence that they can believe these claims. So I think positive relationships at senior levels, I think that that's the foundation of all sales success in enterprise selling. But I agree with what they're trying to say. They're really trying to make a point that the value you bring your customers, not in the relationship, the value you bring the customers in the insights and your ability to help them transform their business. The other point I'd make is that I think risk management is a very important thing in the mind of the buyer, and I don't think us as sellers use risk as a weapon well enough. And again, if you put the right people from your organization, these domain experts, in front of the client, it's going to give them the confidence that we can manage the risks. We know where the risks are, that we've done this before, and that we can go and achieve the outcome for them. How are you guys going to implement these outrageous claims you're making for me? You know, you're saying you can change the world, but if you're going to do that, it's all about people. So how are you going to come in here and have good cultural alignment with us and go and deliver this initiative?
Let's talk about CRM for just a couple of minutes, and I'm especially interested not only because you mentioned it a few times, but because of your background, having been in that end of the sales business, the technology end. What about CRM, and what does one need to do, whether they have Salesforce or whatever else, Sugar or whatever else they have installed? What does a company in general terms need to do to leverage it and enable CRM to enable their salespeople to be more effective and more efficient? What do they need to do?
So in the same way that a sales methodology is not a process, I think a lot of people get confused between sales methodologies and sales processes. In the same way that that's the case, the thing with the CRM is that CRM needs to be a strategy, not a tool for reporting up inside an organization. So people think of CRM as a product that's going to go solve all their problems. And I think there is no bigger change management problem if you're implementing technology, in my view, than CRM. Because despite the contract that an employee signs with their employer that says that their prospects belong to the employer, the way they feel is that their contacts and their network is theirs. And when you're wanting them to put everything inside this central repository, they've got a bias against it. So CRM needs to be treated as a strategy and a process, not as a product and reporting tool. And the people implementing it, management, need to recognize that the internal customer is the salesperson. Make it easy for them, give them a reason to actually put the data in. They're probably the key points to do CRM successfully. You've got to have one, and I don't think failure has got anything to do with the particular brand of the product that people are using. It's the approach they're taking to actually drive change.
Yeah, you absolutely explained that, I think, the right way. I remember, 8 years ago or 7 years ago when we started ESR, a lot of people asked us about CRM, and our view at that point was, if you go buy Oracle off the shelf and take it out and install it, without doing any of the, without having any thoughts about methodology or process. All you're basically doing is automating the chaos that exists right now in your sales organization. You know, that's what you're doing. But I think companies have really gotten to the bottom of this, and I think what you just said is a key. Well, look, we're coming up to the top of the hour. Tony, it was absolutely a thrill to work with you. It's the first time for everybody that Tony and I actually worked together. So this has been just great. And Gary, I'm going to pass this back to you, buddy. Here you go.
Well, Dave, thanks so much. And Tony, we really appreciate you taking time, especially at this early hour in your day, to join us for this and to share your insights with us. I'm looking forward to reading your book, having only just recently become aware. But you've surfaced so many things that when I was a sales manager, ran up against that I'm just dying to dig even deeper. And Dave, thank you so much for bringing Tony to us and making him available and for designing the executive series.